Greetings, friends. Today I will talk about my Circassian flintlock musket. This is the style of gun which was used by Circassian men in the 18th and 19th centuries. Similar pieces were also used by Georgians, by Turks, and pretty much every other people of the Caucasus. It's the classic form of the Caucasian gun, uh, as made by local gunsmiths for over 200 years. Now, this piece is a reproduction. It's made by Hamid Peserey. He runs a trade out of Turkey called Peserey Handicrafts. As far as I know, he's the only person who makes reproductions of Caucasian firearms. Now, because this piece was a custom job, I was able to choose the dimensions. It's 140 centimeters long with a 108 centimeter barrel. That puts it on the larger side for a Caucasian gun, but not too large. And also because the stock is rather thin, the whole piece is pretty light. It's not like what you might be used to with a European brown bess musket or something. This is lighter despite its size, and for me, because I'm 6 feet tall, it fits me pretty well, and I can shoulder it without much trouble. The bore is 16 millimeters, or 63 caliber. It's a smooth bore. At 63 caliber, it's kind of on the upper end of the historical range for a Caucasian gun. And I do believe that this is the largest gun that Hamid has ever made. Normally, he ships pieces that are smaller, like pistol or carbine size. This one, it came to me in separate packages, and I had to assemble it because of its size. The shipping from Turkey was kind of difficult, and there was a little bit of shipping damage, which I was able to fix. And it took quite some time to hand fit everything so that it assembled properly. Basically, the barrel is secured to the stock with these brass bands. This butt piece is separate, and it's secured with this nail. This is a very long nail, and there's shims and glue inside to hold it straight. The barrel is also secured with a tang, 2 screws through the tang, through the stock, and the lock piece, of course, is secured by two screws going through. The whole project took quite a while for me. I definitely needed to use a garage and tools. If I didn't have that, then I would have been in trouble. But Hamid was helpful in communicating what I had to do after I got it. Eventually, it's all come together very well, I think. The stock is covered in leather, so you can see here it looks very nice and it feels nice. The only thing I don't like is that, if it scratches, I don't know of a good way to repair it. You can see some little tiny little scratches there. I don't know, I just take care of it as well as I can. It comes with a steel ramrod right here. I think this might not be historical because one person I saw said that they use wooden ramrods with metal tips, not an all steel ramrod. But it works well. It fits nicely into the stock. It's not threaded, so for proper cleaning and maintenance, I do need a separate threaded ramrod, which you can just buy online, like this one. Now I want to talk about the lock, which most people when they think about a flintlock, they're actually thinking of a specific type of flintlock, which is called a French flintlock. This is a different type of flintlock. It was invented, I believe, in Spain, and people today will usually call it a miquelet lock or a patilla lock. It's different because, unlike the French flintlock, the spring's on the outside of the lock plate, not on the inside. And also, instead of a vertically rotating tumbler to hold the hammer, this one has horizontally protruding sears that stick out of the lock plate. So you can see right here, that's the sear for half cock. And when you pull the trigger, it retracts into the lock plate. There's also a sear for full cock, which is kind of hidden behind the spring, but it is there. You do have to be, I think, a little bit careful with this lock because, if you have the sear retracted most of the way, but not all the way, the hammer can still kind of bind up on it, so it won't be very securely held. You want to kind of have a good eye on it and a good feel for it to make sure that, either the sear is all the way out or all the way in. Otherwise, you could have a dangerous, state where it's kind of in limbo and potentially might be dislodged. Now, this type of lock uh, has some advantages over the French flintlock. It was easier to make, and it was easier to clean in a dusty environment in the Middle East. So that's why the Ottomans preferred it. There is another issue you have to look out for, though, that there's no backstop for the hammer. So if you pull it too far back, you could overspan the spring. So you just have to be careful not to pull the hammer too far back. In Western Europe, it was replaced by the French flintlock, but in the Ottoman Empire and in the Balkans and the Caucasus, they made these for a longer period of time, throughout well into the 1800s in some places, or even all the way, even until the 1900s in some isolated areas. It was basically just the local style of gun that the local gunsmiths were capable of making. There are two different ways of loading it. First is the traditional, or not traditional, but standard method of loading a flintlock that you might be already familiar with. You will have to have the hammer down and the frizzen up for safety. You'll load your powder and ball, ram it down, and then come back here. You can put the hammer on half cock to put it out of the way. Fill up the pan with priming powder, then close the pan cover and the frizzen, and then you take it to full cock and fire. However, that's not the only way of doing it. Historically, what they sometimes did is they would, after you fired, you would keep the pan cover closed. With the hammer on half cock, you'll drop powder down the barrel, and you'll drop your ball, and then you can just kind of hold it like this and shake it with the lock sight facing down. And what this will do is, just with gravity, the powder will fill up the pan. Now, you can pull it up to full cock, and then you're actually ready to fire. So this is called self-priming, and it's what they did in the heat of battle to reload quickly. But there's some issues with it. So obviously it's kind of less safe, because when you're loading, you have a risk of it kind of going off if something goes wrong. And that's why I wouldn't ram it. I wouldn't ever ram when you're self-priming. I would also say that an issue here is the size of the touch hole. So this is a 1/8 inch wide touch hole. You can see it's gaping compared to most muskets. And this is so that the powder can flow through into the pan. And when I ordered this piece, I didn't ask ahead of time what the touch hole size would be. So when I got it, it was kind of a shock. There are two issues with a wide touch hole like this. Number one is you'll lose more pressure from escaping gas. And number two, if somebody's standing in front of it, it could be unpleasant for them. They can get a little bit of a flash or a little bit of a burn if they're close enough, depending on how wide the touch hole is. Now on this piece, the touch hole is actually at an angle because the breech face is ahead of the pan. So if I'm in a firing line, the people on my right are not going to get hit, but if somebody's kind of behind me, like on a shooting range, then I have to be worried about where this gas is going to go. Another issue is that if you are self-priming and you're not ramming it, then the ball won't be properly seated in the powder. That's not ballistically desirable, but also if you have an air gap, if there's some space, then that creates a risk of overpressure, which could be unsafe. I don't know how big of a problem that is when you have when you're loading a smoothbore, because the ball's not stuck, it doesn't have a patch, but it is one more thing to be a little bit worried about. Overall, I wouldn't say that self-priming is just unsafe and you should never do it, but I would typically not do it unless it's like a special time when you want to try it out and have some fun. If you're self-priming, then you should be shooting with 3F powder, because the 3F will flow through the hole into the pan. If you're not self-priming, then you should probably use 2F powder. The 2F will still flow through the hole, but not as much. And then you can load 3F or 4F into the pan. The cock takes a relatively small flint, and with this lock, I found that the geometry is not forgiving. The flint has to be exactly the right size in order for everything to work and come together at the right angles. Almost all flints you can find for sale will be too big, like they'll be too long or too narrow or too thick or something like that. What I've done now is I've purchased 1/2 inch by 5/8 inch flints from Track of the Wolf and grinded them down to be thinner so that they'll fit. However, they're still too narrow to make use of the full space of the frizzen. I imagine agate flints could work because they're sold much thinner. However, they're more expensive and they're out of stock, so I haven't bought any yet. This weapon lacks sights. You just have to look down the barrel. I wish it had a simple bead sight. Now, due to the large touch hole and the lack of sights, I wouldn't call this the most ballistically efficient smoothbore. It's more of a fun gun, especially because you could self-prime and reload it quickly. I gave it a name. It's Chuchunya, which is a Georgian nickname that means pipsqueak, and it was the nickname of Vakhtang Chuchunashvili, who was one of those funny old characters of Georgian history. I am happy with this weapon. I'm very glad to have it. I'm still not sure how I feel about the touch hole, but there's no going back on that. It's my first flintlock, so I'm not too experienced in using it properly. I'm still learning. I, at the end of the day, I would definitely recommend ordering from Hamid if you're interested in this type of firearm. Although this one took a lot of work for me to get going, it's a very nice quality handmade piece in a very special style. I really appreciate the Caucasian type flintlock because it's, in my opinion, the last and most sophisticated example of a pre modern weapon. If you were to draw kind of a cutoff between the age of pre modern weapons and modern weapons manufacturing, I would say that the transition to the modern French flintlock is the most logical place to draw that line. And as far as Western Asia is concerned, that's also the line where weapons started to be imported rather than locally made. So not only is this the last of the pre-modern weapons, it's also the most sophisticated of the non-Western ones. When you look at a piece like this, despite it being a flintlock gun, you should see it in a context of an essentially medieval society. A weapon like this would have been a prized possession of a Caucasian family man. Not rare, but still probably the most sophisticated item owned by anyone in the village, something to be cared for and passed down across generations. Thanks, guys, for listening to me. I want to get you some shooting content, but unfortunately, it's hard because there's really nowhere for me to do that unless I drive for like 3 hours. So we'll see. Thanks, guys and girlies. Bye.